It's a challenge to try to bring together all the diverse and very interesting papers that were presented at a meeting like this. And what I did, I asked the session chairs if they would help me by putting together a summation of some of the key points. And drawing those together, I've taken a fair amount of license in trying to develop broad themes so that we can move forward from this meeting. The themes of the conference were to look at the adaptation to global change and the coast, global change and managing environmental risk, developing the marine and coastal economy, and tackling inequality in coastal communities. Now, these were all new and innovative themes that basically took us forward. They build upon the Littoral 2008 meeting that was held in Venice. They support the declaration of that meeting, in which we encouraged all of us and the EU people to think about creating a more effective platform for the communication of information, the integration of research, to inform policy and management decisions. And what we have dealt with in this meeting actually resonates quite well with what the European Commission's senior managers are worrying about and considering for future development. It's also helped us as a community of researchers, practitioners, to actually look at how to better integrate the research findings, how to make better use of the experience that has been gained, and the practical application of science in management at the community level and wider. So in that sense, the conference has been an integrating initiative in its own right. Some important points have come out from the meeting, and unfortunately I think one or two of the European Commission people didn't quite grasp the three broad dimensions to global change, so I want to reiterate those at the moment. There is biogeophysical change, and what we're seeing is a reduction in ecosystem health and productivity in the delivery of environmental goods and economic goods and services. That's very critical, and that's what Kerry Kerner was talking about in the economic keynote. Globalization of economic drivers is really having a major impact upon the coast, because the coast is at the frontier, at the front line of globalization, because of trade, because of natural resources production, because of changes in the economies of developing countries and so forth. The majority of that pressure is in the coastal realm. And as a result of movement of people towards the coast, and because of increasing dependence upon natural resource systems, upon access to international trade routes and so forth, and increasing globalization of people in communities such as cities, really we are becoming increasingly dependent upon the coastal regions to maintain and help improve the welfare of our people. But at the same time, the concentration of people, the concentration of economic activity, the globalization of forces that really control what we do, it makes us much more vulnerable to man and natural-induced natural hazards. Natural hazards are there. We can make people more vulnerable to them by putting them in the path of danger and increasing the potential effect of that danger. We've seen natural events such as tsunamis. We've also seen man-accelerated problems such as erosion, flooding, and so forth. And the real point about all this is that it damages every public and private investment we make, every community initiative that we develop to try to improve the welfare of people. We don't want to make people more vulnerable. We want to make people less vulnerable. And that is a major challenge that needs the integration of the biogeophysical, the economic, and the social drivers that affect the future of coasts. So in that sense, much of the economic development planning, policy making, is predicated on the idea that future economic growth and diversification of economies will be the main instrument in delivering improved welfare for people. It's perhaps a questionable assumption, and it's one that we need to challenge very carefully. And I think Kerry Turner was very effective in bringing that out, because he made the point that globalization is not necessarily delivering equitable benefits and is creating an increasing burden on poorer sections of society in both developing and in developed nations. And that's something we really need to think about in terms of globalization and equity. And as a result of these forces, these very, very dynamic and strong global forces, we're seeing that inequality is actually increasing, which doesn't really encourage unaccepting adoption of economic forecasts and so forth. So we need to move forward as a broad community of practitioners, scientists, managers, and so forth. We do have the knowledge. There are tools available. We do have the practical experience to deliver sustainable and durable coastal development. What we have seen from many of the papers is that communities don't want more studies, they want action. And I think we're in a position to actually help deliver action that can improve situations where there is inequality, to perhaps moderate the effects of globalization and so forth. I'm not saying globalization is wrong, I'm just saying that we need to think very carefully about how it affects the investment in public and private communities, economic activities, and so forth. So I would argue that the papers that have been delivered at this meeting demonstrate that we do have the capacity to act, and act in a responsible and very forward-thinking way. But one of the things that has come out is that we're moving from science towards governance. We now see from our social studies, from our economic studies, and our biogeophysical studies, that we're not using information effectively in making decisions about how to develop our coasts. And that needs to be thought about very carefully, because what we need is a stronger governance structure in which that information can be effective, in which that experience can be applied more effectively. And we have to remember, with the global recession we're going through at the moment, it's going to be increasingly important to make effective and efficient use of the investment in science, the investment in management, and so forth. So if anything, there's a greater need now, today, for improved integration of science and policy and so forth than there ever has been before. It's very important to recognize that. So in strengthening governance, there are some potentially very beneficial assets that we can work with. The European Integrated Coastal Zone Management recommendation was a major step forward, but it lacks statutory authority, and it lacks sort of enthusiastic adoption and implementation by individual member states. So a great idea, but it lacks teeth and it lacks acceptance, partly because we have not clearly demonstrated enough or communicated effectively enough the economic, social, and environmental benefits that can be gained through use of tools such as integrated coastal management. And on top of that, the recent EU directives on marine strategy, maritime policy, and so forth have tended to draw attention away from integrated coastal management as a powerful tool in addressing problems and issues at the watershed level, the coastal level, and at the marine level. So as a result, and I think this was brought up in the last session, there is an increasing coastal policy vacuum that reduces the effective application of research, experience, and the available tools. What are we to do about that? Well, I would argue that governance is the challenge. Science can inform governance. We have very good experience from around the world where improved governance of coastal areas has had beneficial effects. So ICZM has the power to improve the application of tools such as the Water Framework Directive, the maritime policy, in strengthening the integration of development planning at a catchment to ocean level, that continuum. We need to have joined up governance. We can't just treat the highlands as totally independent from the marine system. So what we really need to do is to use all the experience, the knowledge, and so forth that we've gained through support from the European Commission, through our own institutions, to encourage a much stronger enabling environment then that means there needs to be a clear mandate at a European level to strengthen coastal governance. We also need to encourage the European Commission and the European Parliament to strengthen the integration of EU policy instruments. You can't continue to develop new instruments that then are not clearly related to previous instruments. You need to build one instrument that supports the next instrument and so forth. That is not really happening. And lastly, we need to strengthen incentives to apply the principles and practices of coastal management within a more robust governance framework. So I would urge all of you to think forward to the next Littoral and to the application in your own research and development programs, to thinking about how can we encourage, how can we demonstrate the benefits of strengthening governance in the European and wider community. Thank you.